All right, guys, what's up? It's Jack, and welcome back to another video. And today we're going to be talking about the one thing that pretty much a lot of XDefiant players are going to complain about at launch or just in general with the game, especially in the beginning, if not maybe for the first few months. And that is skill-based matchmaking. Now, I know some of you guys are thinking right off the bat, like, Jack, what the fuck are you talking about? There's no skill-based matchmaking in XDefiant. It's already been said by the devs and all that kind of stuff. So hear me out for a second. And I'm just going to say right off the bat that just because people are complaining about it doesn't automatically mean that it exists. Okay. So I think I even remember people during the beta like tweet about it and saying, yo, there's definitely skill-based matchmaking in here and or anything like that, blah, blah, blah. And the thing is this, guys, we're going to have to take a step back and look at reality for a minute. And that is that it is not 2010 anymore. Hell, it's not even 2015 anymore. It's almost 2024. And one of the things we have to remember is that getting better at a video game or getting help and a certain understanding of knowledge in a game is a lot more easily accessible and a lot more common knowledge today than it was back in the days of 2010, for instance. Now, the reason why I use 2010 as an example or as a time slot is for two reasons. Number one, it's kind of easy mathematically. And number two, in 2010, online multiplayer gaming, as far as consoles are concerned, were only in existence for about 6 years at the time, because it all started with Microsoft and with Halo 2 coming out and Xbox Live officially going live in, I believe it was September of 2004. So that was the beginning of everything. And of course, a lot of players were nowhere near, like, even if you look at yourself, for instance, right? Look at yourself, or even me as an example. Was I better or worse back then? And the answer to that question is I was way worse back then than what I was today. But so was everybody else, right? There were only very few people that actually stood out. And usually those were PC players that actually went on to console because the player numbers were higher, right? And it was a lot more common for people to play on console than on PC, obviously, especially back then. So a lot of PC players that were familiar with multiplayer gaming from the PC side of things, because PC has always been ahead, even in that area. That was like in the late 90s to when that started, and I believe it was with Quake. But anyway, people that were familiar with multiplayer gaming through the PC side of things that made their transition to console, for them it was an easy transition simply because of the fact that they understood certain things that everybody else that started on consoles back then didn't understand. Like, for instance, spawns was a big one, and just understanding the feel and how the flow of things go back then especially put you ahead of the game. But now it's common knowledge. It's not just skill anymore. I mean, anybody can have a decent amount of skill in a game, right? But also, it's also knowledge. You have to have a certain amount of knowledge. And of course, with every single game, and this is something that I always struggle with every single game, I go through this every single time, right? Like, over the years with Call of Duty, by the time a game launches and by the time it finishes its year life cycle, back in the day, when I played Call of Duty consistently, I would be at about a 2.5 KD average. My score per minute would be anywhere from 400 to 500. And my win-loss would be generally pretty good, especially since I played a lot of free-for-all as well, which would obviously boost my score, my win-loss quite a bit. But me personally, I don't count top 3 as a win. I personally only count being number 1 as a win in free-for-all, but obviously Call of Duty doesn't see it that way. I disagree. I always have and I always will. I think anybody who gets second or anywhere from second to last should be a loss, not a top 3 in free-for-all. But anyway, back on topic here. This is no longer 2010. This is no longer the case. Like, right now, everything is a lot more common knowledge. More people are watching YouTube more than ever, whether they're noobs or not. People in general are a lot more skilled in games on average, no matter how casual they are, simply because of the fact that right now, in comparison to 2010, games were always kind of something that was almost like a taboo subject in a sense. But now it's widely accepted. So I always struggled, right, in the beginning of every single game's life cycle with Call of Duty when I played it consistently, I struggled for about, I would say, the first month or maybe 2 at the most. And my stats would be a lot lower than what they normally would be, right? Everything just wouldn't, nothing would click, right? It was almost like I was playing Call of Duty again for the first time, even though that wasn't the case, but you get the deal, right? No matter how familiar a game is, even if it's the same brand, even if it's the same title in the game and you're just getting another sequel or whatever, with the new game, unless you're already familiar with it because you have early access or whatever it is, you're gonna be already, like, you're gonna struggle with the little subtle differences within every game. And the same applies for XDefiant. So a lot of people, let's just face it here, especially in this day and age, from what I'm seeing from this generation, and I'm trying to say this as respectfully as possible, and a lot of players really are not as good as they think they are. It's true, especially when it comes to pubs and everything like that. And hell, we even live in a day right now to where so many years later, it's been discovered that so-and-so was cheating on this game, but they capitalized on it, they made their money, and then that was it, right? I wouldn't be surprised if we see certain people that we thought are legit continue to come out and prove that they cheated. Not themselves necessarily, but somebody's going to look something up, somebody's going to see something sus. So it wouldn't surprise me one bit. And it's a sad thing that the majority of these gameplay channels, whether it was zombies, whether it's multiplayer or whatnot, the vast higher percentage majority of these people were just, they were doing something to make them look better than what they originally were, whether it's reverse boosting, whether it's, cherry picking or whatever you want to call it, whether it's using a Cronus that they just happened to know about way before it became common knowledge, right? So, but the reality of things is as such. And that is that, number one, especially in the beginning, you're not as good as you think you are. And number two, when you actually look at what the top players in the world are able to do and what they know and what they're able to accomplish, and the amount of time you spend that is spent playing, especially when it's legit and versing other people of that high caliber and that high competition, there's something to be said about that. There's a very good reason as to why, even in athletics like sports, there is a noticeable gap, a very significant gap between the amateur and the professional. When you're a pro at something, and this includes gaming, believe it or not, you literally are the top of the food chain. Now, are there a few anomalies, so to speak, to where there are a few exceptions here and there in terms of people that are not pro, but they have that skill level? There are, but those are very rare, right? And again, I'm willing to give some of those really popular names the benefit of the doubt, but at the same time, it's very rare. But at the same time, it's I like to have faith that such and such could make it happen against pro players, sure. But at the same time, when you're looking at more recent times, it's like a whole bunch of dirt is being dug up and we're finding all sorts of information about all sorts of players. So, but either way, it's like, okay, whatever, it makes for interesting conversation. But at the end of the day, when XDefiant comes out, people will be uttering and crying to the heavens that, oh my gosh, they lied to us, skill-based matchmaking. No. That is not the case at all. The case simply is the fact that, number one, you're not just as good as you think you are. Number two, players today are better on average than what they were back in the day, simply because of time. For instance, there's a reason why certain generations of athletes are better overall in terms of athletic performance. And again, this doesn't necessarily include steroids either, right? Obviously, steroids now are more popular than what they were back then. Like when you're looking at the 60s or the 70s in professional sports compared to now. Like right now, if you want to be a professional bodybuilder with your IFBB card, everybody that's an IFBB pro bodybuilder is on performance-enhancing drugs, on pharmaceuticals. That's just the reality of things. So, and when it comes to other things like professional sports, it's the same thing, whether it's basketball, baseball, or whatever. Even if you're doing, like there's, like for instance, TRT, testosterone replacement therapy, again, that's not natural. That is indeed steroids. And again, it also depends on how you use it. You know, it's some people use it for medicine purposes, you know, and other people use it for performance enhancing purposes. So, and this is everywhere. But when you're looking at overall, like even if you were to let's take steroids out of the equation. When you look at the overall knowledge and performance, it's gotten better over time. And the reason for this is because with time, the more time you spend doing something, no matter what it is, and the more common it becomes and the more familiar it is, the better you're going to get at it. That's just the natural progression of things. This is why things in terms of overall athletic performance and knowledge about health and exercise and all that kind of stuff, it's actually improved over the years. And that's because of our fact to be educated. And that's why I mentioned earlier that it's not just about your own personal skills that you may be blessed with, but it's also about your knowledge, right? And this is why professionals are the top of the food chain, because of their level of knowledge. Like, and as I get close to ending this video here, I just want to say, like, for instance, let me give you the ultimate example, right? If all of a sudden in let's say I've played a lot, I put in a lot of time into Halo Ranked in terms of amount of time invested. You know, I haven't taken it too seriously, to be honest with you, but in terms of time invested, because I enjoy it, because I enjoy the way the competitive Halo game mode works, and that it's more fun for me. If all of a sudden, let's say Optic Gaming, right, were to contact me and say, hey, we want to, you know, we want to bring you here and spend 3 months with the team, and you're going to get a taste of what the pro experience is like. By the time those 3 months ends, I will come back and I will not be the same player that I was when I left. And there's a multitude of reasons because of that. Number one, because I'm going to be playing with and against, right, some of the best players in the world. I am going to learn a lot of things that I couldn't even think of from the best players in the world, because they know the game to that level. I am going to leave with knowledge that is going to help propel me to continue to get better after those 3 months. I'm going to have an insight to the methodology and the philosophy and the grind, and let's not mention the amount of time played during those 3 months, right? So by the time I go back to my regular life, guess what? I will not be the same player. Even if I were just playing it, like not taking it seriously and all that kind of stuff, I guarantee you, in a short time span of 3 months, and all those 3 months invested into like having that experience and sucking as much information like a sponge from those pro players, I guarantee you I will not be that same player. And that's because I've literally gotten so much information and knowledge, and of course game time and application of that knowledge, that is enabled me and allowed me to go from being a player of this caliber to a player of that caliber. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that all of a sudden I'll be pro caliber. No. I'm simply saying that I will be improving. The only difference, improve greatly as well, but the difference is that it would be amplified simply because of the fact that I'm getting like top quality knowledge and time with these other players that are the best in the world. Okay, so when you put that together, and then when you take it to the other side and you look at it from a perspective of the amount of time from, like, let's say the 2010 era to today in terms of players, the amount of things that players have learned, your average players, the amount of time that they've put into the game, the amount of time that the amount of things that they've learned, applications, watching YouTube videos, maybe even making videos, or inspired to be content creators or whatever it is. It is a completely different time now, and therefore we have improved. Now, have we also taken a few steps back? Yes, unfortunately, yes. But when you're looking at the overall average of things, people are just better on average. Like I said, there's always going to be noobs. That's just the natural cycle of things. But regardless of which, one of the things that we got to remember is that people are not as bad as they were back when Black Ops 2 first released, or when Black Ops 1 first released. That is just not a thing anymore. So that is just something that I believe we need to keep in mind. And we also need to keep in mind that knowledge with skill combined are always going to be superior to just skill alone. As a matter of fact, vastly superior, because making the proper decision is what's gonna set you above everybody else in that average lobby. And what you have to do is you have to go through the motions of learning the new game, no matter how similar it is to said game, so to speak. So when the game releases, when XDefiant releases, and when, you know, before you start thinking about crying about skill-based matchmaking being in the game when it's actually not, think about what was mentioned in this commentary and try to put things in perspective. And hopefully it'll give you a better insight, more positive way of thinking, and just knowing in the back of your mind that, hey, I'm going to grind this. I'm going to put my time into it. There's no skill-based matchmaking. I just need to kind of get better. And that's what's going to set me apart. And eventually it will. So anyway, guys, that concludes this video. This video was a lot longer than I intended it to be, but there's a lot that I had to say. So anyway, with that being said, I'd like to thank everybody for taking the time to watch and or listen. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.